All right, looks like recording started. So 7:33, let's call this meeting to order. Get a roll call.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bright?
Present.
Ms. Dickinson?
Present.
Ms. Clement?
Present.
Mr. Kapler, he let me know he wasn't going to be able to make it this morning. Ms. Shaw?
Present.
Mr. Stevie?
Present today.
Thank you. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great. Let's get the show on the road. Getting a review and approval of the minutes from our last formed meeting. Looks like it was in April. I have a motion for that or discussion needed?
I can't make a motion because I wasn't at that one. Maybe someone who was present could make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Carol Clement, I will second the motion.
Any discussion required? No, hearing no. I'll put out a vote. All yeas.
Yay.
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 I'll yay that. Any no's? Hearing none, sounds like we have an unanimous for that one, Maria.
Thank you.
And moving into our first case, 44 East Broadway. It's like a new ATM kiosk. Ooh, big moves. Can we get a staff update?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, this is a new ATM kiosk in downtown. It's on an existing parking lot. So the kiosk includes, besides the ATM machine, they're providing for a new slab to provide for ADA compliance, and there's going to be some bollards to protect it and some electric installations. This is an RNA review, so the attachment in the agenda shows the purview there by the DRB, and unless there's any other questions for me, I think the applicant is ready for a presentation.
Hey, Maria, should we, I think we put sounds like we have a guest in the, we used to do that at the beginning. Didn't we used to have call the audience at the beginning, or are we just doing that at the end now?
I failed to include it, Mr. Chair, so please feel free to add it right now to the agenda. And,
before we get deep,
I had been discussing in the past with the zoning administrator where to place that call of the audience. Since, these are not public hearings, right? These are just public meetings, but the DRB has the ability to decide if somebody, could speak. And, the DRB has the ability to decide if they think it's better at the beginning or at the end of the presentation by the applicant.
I think in the past, Maria, we've done, especially since we went virtual and we were recording these audios, was if there was an audience member who was not directly related or making presentation, that they would just identify themselves and their address as to where they live to identify that they're in the city. But there wasn't necessarily a speaking task added to that. I think that was a case-by-case basis, like identify. It was more of an identification task, right? Like just make sure
That
we
is
know who was
correct.
on the call. So if
That
we,
is correct.
let's
Mr.
do
Chair.
that. Let's do that now before we let's back up one half step here. Let's do that now. If we have any guests in the audience that are on this call that are not making presentation or part of the board, they could identify and just state your address for the record. So actually, that's another thing, Maria. We've been kind of lax on that too, is having people identify their address when they speak.
Correct. And we do have a caller present. Steve, could you please identify yourself and give us your name and address?
I'm Steve Dolan. I'm an observer today, primarily because I may speak at a future DRB meeting, and I'm just trying to practice the audio, and I'm still can't do the audio, but at least I'm here on phone, but I'm just an observer. I'm not speaking about anything today. Thank you.
And if you can state your address, Steve, please.
4154 North Torlita in the Tucson Mountains. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Look forward to meeting you on a future meeting. Maria, we can move on to item 3 then.
Okay. Taylor, are you ready to share your screen?
Absolutely. All right. Y'all ready for me?
Go right ahead.
All right. So I'm Taylor Hall with PM Design Group. We have been working with Stratus Unlimited, who is working with US Bank on installing these remote bank ATM kiosks into parking lots around the nation. This project has been, unique in that it's one of the first that I've done in a downtown corridor, and so I've been working with Maria as well as some other contacts in the city of Tucson for meeting the requirements for the site plan review, design review board, RNAs, etc. We have gone through a couple different of those reviews already and submitted to Maria and coordinated for the RNA submittal. We did submit for an exception to a comment per our site plan review regarding a 10-foot clear zone. Coordinated with the property owner, he requested an exemption for that. So that's been submitted as well. I believe you had the code reference in there. I believe it's one of these. I can pull that up if necessary, but so the location that we're proposing is adjacent to the building. Let me pull back up the Google to feel it's clearest. We're proposing a standalone ATM here adjacent to this building. We would remove a portion of this fence, patch and repair the fence to match to go and route behind the ATM. That way the parking lot is still a fenced in area from public access. The ATM would be installed flush with the parking surface and sidewalk here so that it is accessible. Someone could roll up to it with a wheelchair and access the ATM. We feel it complies with and matches similar ATMs in the area. So, is there anything you would like me to address initially?
Materials.
So the
structure.
So it does contain structural columns that are encased within this canopy surround. So there's an ATM kiosk that's installed and anchored to the new structural slab. They route all their wiring and stuff, and then this surround plus canopy is attached to it. Should pull this up initially. I've got a cut sheet of the surround that's proposed. So here's a three-dimensional or isometric view of it. One of these. There we go. There's a colored rendering. So it would be metal housing, epoxy painted blue, with client logos, a backlit sign with signage front and back of the kiosk itself, as well as either side per the box sign. As mentioned, bollards to protect the front of the ATM kiosk. I believe we have the setback required from right of way per the sidewalk depth. We initially had 2 bollards at the rear of the. I'm getting really bad feedback here. We removed 2 bollards at the rear of the ATM kiosk in order to get the fence closer to the ATM and provide as much space as possible for the parking spaces existing to remain behind the ATM. As mentioned, pull that form up. Let's see, is it PDMR? And requested the exception to the 10-foot clear space behind the ATM due to the limited amount of parking that's available, not only in the parking lot, but in the area. Any other inquiry?
Yeah, I just have a question. So it looks like, is that an accessible parking space right behind it there? Then you're in the zone there for the accessible parking spot?
That was one of our initial inquiries, both to the client and the property owner, and no, it was deemed as not. It's not marked as such, and the clear space that's existing there does not meet the accessible, like loading zone areas. It was just, there wasn't enough space for another parking space.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
This is Carol Clement. I have a question. The face of the ATM is indeed set back a little bit from the face of the building. Am I reading the plans correctly?
Yes, we'd have approximately 1 foot, possibly 1'6" distance from the property line and adjacent building face to the face of our ATM. However, the canopy, the overhang for protection from elements would extend a little bit beyond that.
But the walking space, the existing sidewalk walking space is essentially clear.
Yeah, it would be unimpeded.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Kind of can't see all the hands of people have hands up. I have a couple, Taylor.
Absolutely.
In your CAD elevation versus your colored ones you have here, and in the plan view that you were showing, there was one image. It was the straight one, had a power pedestal, looked like probably a junction box pedestal, and a light. Those are not shown on your plan views that you've been showing us.
Correct. Yeah. So the original design and a standard design would include, yes, the electrical meter pedestal as well as a light fixture to provide adequate security lighting at the ATM face. However, this project, we did do the research and coordinated with various Tucson and the power company, and it was deemed that there would have been quite a bit of work to route underground to a nearby transformer. So the route that was, or the preference would be to install and tie into the existing building, which the property owner has approved. So they would install a sub-meter within the building and then run a bore from this point to the ATM. So we would not need the additional equipment. The sub-meter would be within the building, and we're providing the ATM canopy has its own light fixture.
My other set of questions kind of deal with the adjacent building. Has that adjacent building owner had any support or opposition to this project, or opportunity to provide support or opposition to this structure being located. I know we have zero property line in that area. Are there any concerns about fire? This is an electrical components in this, or theft or I mean, we have a zero lot line. I wonder if there's any concerns with that and the adjacent building.
So I have not had that direct communication with the adjacent property owner. I know that the bank as well as the property owner have had a lot of coordination. I imagine they would have had a conversation with that property owner, but I have not personally.
Okay, so that leads me to the other question. If this property owner is really 44 Broadway, they're picking that location at the corner, that actually makes this appear to be more related to the adjacent building, visually, aesthetically. Can you walk us through the decision for that location versus a location maybe on the other side of the parking lot, or that just to the east, that the east corner of that parking lot, that fence goes all the way across that parking area, and it seems like you'd have very similar access, pedestrian access on the other side of that parking lot. Can you walk us through why you're locating in that kind of on this property a little more remotely from your services, from the building that's actually, from this owner who's actually kind of facilitating this
Yes,
build?
I follow. Yeah, I believe that the large driving factor was discussion regarding that that clear space area that was being unused. That was a big factor, as well as this is a motor for a rolling gate, and that gate rolls right into that area where you're discussing. I mean, I do not know whether they discussed here immediately in front of the building and whether that's an opportunity. But yeah, that location here would be kind of hard to manage with the gate rolling right into that area.
Oh, right. I forgot about the rolling gate in there. I walk my dog by that site all the time, so I'm pretty familiar with where we're at.
There's potentially room here, but I imagine the property owner did not want to block these storefront windows here.
Correct, and there's actually a spot on that property against the panko wall, but that wall would be even more of a probably historic. There's a utilities, of course there's a van in front of us at that spot, that fake grass area there, but so I guess that kind of brings me to, as we start moving through our criteria that we're going to be looking at being in the Rio Nuevo, the things I'm seeing right off the bat, and I kind of want to push this to the architecture representatives on the board, is I know this, since it's a kiosk and a standalone entity, it really doesn't blend with anything in there. It has no relationship to any of the other structures, even though you're being placed within a foot of a building. The architectural elements and materials of this really just don't. It's kind of a sore thumb on that corner, on that spot. Wanted to get some opinions from the board on feelings of a big blue box next to a old preserved building and next to a new building that has some decent design to it.
That's an interesting concept. I mean, I wonder if there are other colorways that could be used and still keep with their branding, and maybe something other than blue, something more neutral.
We can certainly work with the manufacturer of the surround to conform with the color of the vicinity. Yeah, I could see a neutral color with maybe those client logos still being the typical client colors.
I think that would be favorable.
At least on the sides and back, maybe, and maybe have that front facade as you step up to the machine be the bright blue. that does impact your visibility. The signage and the roof structure on top. I don't know. I have concerns about this type of entity in that location in a downtown in our downtown. I think this is a new type of installation. The only thing I can think of that's similar to this is the Bank of America kiosk on 4th Avenue, and that's kind of outside of the downtown core. But this is kind of right in a kind of a funky little spot. It's kind of an odd spot for this element, but I guess I'm a little split on my opinion of it right off the bat, in that it's a kind of a functional. This is almost a nuts and bolts part of urban living, but at the same time, it still needs to kind of you want it to stick out because you want to be able to see it from all the way down the street, right? You want people to have visibility to know that it's there, but at the same time, I don't want it to stick out and have visibility so people walking down the street know that it's there.
Absolutely. No, I understand the need to conform. Yeah. Go ahead.
We will have some criteria when we start jamming through our criteria of looking at this within the Rio Nuevo district, of having materials and shade and lighting and things like that, if we're considering this a standalone building or a standalone structure, those things come into play.
Understood.
Susanna, you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the color doesn't fit there. I'm not sure that sign on the top is necessary. It just seems like visually, I mean, there's enough signage on the front piece. And to realize, are you looking for pedestrians or cars with that? Because this is just a one-way street, right? So I would say that signage on the top seems particularly offensive architecturally. I mean, just because it's just stuck on. But I think, I mean, obviously it's not part of our purview whether this should be there in the first. I mean, obviously there's a need and desire for the bank customers, I assume. But
Ms. Dickinson, members of the DRB, just to clarify, if the sign is part of the architecture of the structure, it will fall within the purview of the DRB to review. We have a lot of signs, on buildings that you have reviewed, but they're not part of the architecture of the building. So that's just reviewed separately, through the sign review process that we have in place. But if it's determined that the sign is part of the architecture of the structure, then yeah, it has to be reviewed by the DRB.
If I may, we have had projects where this box sign atop the canopy has been removed. It is an optional accessory to it.
Yeah, even just with that sign, there's plenty of room on the side of that box to maybe do something lower than that. Who did I just cut off? I just cut someone off. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say, in keeping with what Susanna mentioned with it being one-way street, I agree that if you put signage on the side of the kiosk, if that would be visible to cars coming down the street toward the ATM, that would be preferable, and just take off that upper sign and make the kiosk a more neutral color, of course, preserving their branding for their logo, but if the entire kiosk itself could be something more neutral than that bright blue, it would blend in a little bit better with the area.
Yeah, and because of the direction of the traffic, they're not going to see that sign anyway because it's kind of tucked behind that building.
Yeah, in my opinion, this is purely a pedestrian-oriented device.
Yeah, and so I think the sign on the front is enough just to get the point across. And then, like I said, if, as has been mentioned, if it's a neutral color, it won't stick out so much. And as long as, you know, and it looks like that isn't a disability unloading zone because of the color. I think it would be blue, right, if it was, you know, as long as no spots are being lost. That seems the main thing.
Board members, I noticed on the specifications that for color options, there was the blue, black, and white, and blue was checked. Would white be an option for the color? Go back to that sheet showing this, the specifications, Mr. Hall. Yeah, there, paint information. White, black, blue.
Yeah, I believe it's just listing their color numbers for each part of this whole assembly.
Oh, not for the enclosure itself.
Yeah, I believe it's calling out the white and black. That's part of the logos as well as the blue for the entire canopy. However, they do you know, numerous different banking institutions. They do surrounds for pretty much everybody. They can do custom colors, custom designs.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to drop on my my loaded question of where I was kind of headed when I first started about discussions with the adjacent property owner. I feel there's a missed opportunity to have this thing integrated into the structure next door, material wise, and have it appear as though it's a adjacent, you know, that if that stack block appearing, you know, the facade of the building next door kind of jutted out and wrapped around this enclosure and had some architectural consistency with the building next door, and this kiosk was inset into that enclosure, into that space, it would have more of a storefront appeal look to the Point Apartments next door. I think it's a missed opportunity. I'm wondering if there's functional issues with doing something like that, as far as the access and maintenance of that structure or of the kiosk, or if something like that would just be totally off the table, because I would rather see that than a standalone blue box floating in a adjacent parking lot.
Well, I would just say that obviously, architecturally, it'd be nice to be integrated into a building. But if it was just like this, like nub built on the side of a big building, I think it would look worse than being a standalone piece, personally. Because, you know, then you'd have to have a roof, you know, it wouldn't. I mean, in more urban environments, it's just usually part of the building. But if you just added a little bit on, I think it would look worse than having it standalone.
I can see that. It looks like a little wart off the side of the building.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, you know, with architecture, we do various types of architecture. I know that you know, you're talking about a lot more maintenance costs, you know, the construction costs as well to create something like that. You know, there's a lot more involvement as you know, opposed to just the standalone ATMs. They kind of self-sufficient. I know that the client would have proposed to the property owner, and they may have even reached out to the property owner of this building to explore that option as well. But we've done numerous projects where they have systems that incorporate directly into a storefront system, as you both mentioned that would be desirable. I imagine, you know, that was decided against for whatever reason. So thus we resulted in this standalone unit.
Yeah, I noticed the precedents are all integrated. Are there any standalone units in downtown at this point, or this will be the first?
I did not find any examples in the immediate area.
Actually, truthfully, ATMs are a woefully lacking public service in the downtown area. There are not very many of them. So this may be, the location is kind of funky, but that's not my decision. I think
Mr. Chair,
if there's any other, okay, go ahead, Marie, sorry.
I just wanted to mention, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, if the proposed structure would be attached to that next door building to the west, the apartment building, that will require review by the PRS and the Historic Preservation Officer, because that structure is designated as a contributor to the Downtown National Register.
Well, I guess on that point, does having a bright blue kiosk directly adjacent to it affect it? I guess it doesn't affect its ability to still be a contributor because it's not touching it, right?
And that is correct. I did confirm with the Historic Preservation Officer, and the RNA in the UDC right now requires historic preservation standards to be applied only if there's a historic or a structure on site. This site does not have a historic structure. It's different than when you use, let's say, the infill incentive district tool or the main gate district tool or the Sunshine Mile district tool. In that case, the code calls out for historic preservation review if there's adjacent historic or eligible to be historic structures. So in this case, the Historic Preservation Officer cannot come in because there's no historic structure on site. But if the proposed ATM kiosk was to be, next attached to, a contributor, then she has something to say about it.
I guess I would just
I'd
say
like to
it doesn't.
say, go ahead.
I was just going to say it doesn't bother me that it's a standalone structure, and I understand that it might be complicated to integrate with that existing apartment building, but I think if the color of it could be matched to the gray of the block, it would blend in much better, and the location could be where it's designed, and just match that gray block, and then have the bank logo on it, and maybe everyone would be happy.
I agree with Miss Rosemary right then.
And take the sign off the top.
Right, yep.
So that's where I was going to kind of head was, let's move through our, I think it's like a 14-point checklist that we kind of have to run through, and we can identify those points that were just made, because I agree with those points. And let's move through our checklist so we can see if there's anything else that comes up by moving through that, and we can catalog those for any motions that we'd like to make as we move through. I think this one's going to be a little odd because it's, I'd say technically a building. It's a structure, but I don't know if it's really a building. So a lot of these are probably going to be non-applicable because we're not necessarily going to meet the scale of a 4-story building with a kiosk. So I don't think we're really applicable for number 1. Number 2, we're pretty much holding close to the setbacks in that zone. I don't think there's much room to play with that very much, and I don't know if this this small structure really impacts the, I guess, the setback. That the intent of that one, setback, it doesn't create an odd inset or jut out of the facades of those buildings. Windows, porticos, cornices, pilasters, columns, balconies. It'd be kind of odd if this thing had a balcony. It'd be kind of cool though if you had to go to the 2nd floor to do your ATM work. No, it's not 50 feet wide. Pedestrian scale, down shield, glare controlled light. So Taylor, this might be a question for you. Is there a light underneath that overhang that's part of the kiosk to light the space directly under? I know you had in your other images a standalone pole light. Is there a small light right underneath the overhang on this structure?
Correct. There is a 12-inch by 12-inch LED light fixture that's on the underside of that canopy, directly over where someone would be standing to operate the kiosk.
Great. So it has some functional issue of safety, and it's glare controlled, and will give a little light to the front of this thing.
Absolutely.
Right on. We're not modifying a historic building because, as Maria gave us some input on. Collected heat. I guess we need to look at a shade study of. This would be an interesting one. Does anyone want to jump in on this, on how we would interpret that for a small kiosk like this, of just the kiosk itself, or is it the entire? Does this trigger the entire facade of the structure, Maria? Staff or anyone have any input on that?
I wasn't too concerned about the shade study just because of, the location of the ATM kiosk and the relationship with the tall buildings in the area. It's facing north. It's providing that canopy for the users of the ATM. So I was focusing on the ATM alone versus the entire parking lot. So they're just adding this ATM kiosk. That's why I was not concerned. But if the DRB feels different, please let me know, and I can triple check with the zoning administrator.
I kind of had the same thoughts. I think the structure itself would probably cast enough of a shadow across that of the pedestrian way there that I'd say we'd be within a honest play of 50%.
Yeah, I would agree. The building is meeting that requirement.
It does not require vehicle parking areas, and I think it being set back just a touch, and the way the width of that sidewalk in there, its use and would not necessarily impact pedestrians. And if someone's riding their bike through there, they're breaking the law on their own. Just discuss shade. I believe shade. I think we'll give this one a pass on the shade. Doing a diagram for us. So these are the ones that I think of 12 and 13, the ones I was thinking about with the discussion we were having prior, would become applicable, where colors conform to the overall color palette and context of downtown. The rationales for expressive or idiosyncratic use of color shall be described in the site plan. I think color was a topic we stopped on, and the color chosen currently is more of a branding color with think that deep royal blue is US Bank's primary marketing color. I think if we make a motion for this project, that toning down the west, south, and east sides of this structure to something that blends more with the adjacent building was the direction we were heading. So I think we'd add that to any motions we make.
Yeah, I like Rosemary's idea of matching the gray of the adjacent block.
And new buildings should use patterns, materials, elements relate to traditional context of the downtown area. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get a different pattern. That was where I was kind of heading with it. Asking about materials was if we could get something other than a sheet metal surround on this thing, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think the fence line that jogs around this on the east and south side will help kind of bring it around to that fence. Doesn't necessarily fit with all of downtown Tucson, but it is a structure and it's kind of a traditional fence look. So I think that might assist to this structure and blending a little better. And it's obviously going to give 24-hour street level activity. And I guess parking area stuff, vehicular circulation, we could probably pass by most of this, other than the concern that the verification that the area this is being put into is striped off on that existing parking lot for reasons other than it being a vehicle accessibility spot. Correct?
Was that an inquiry to me? I apologize.
No, that was to the board.
Okay.
Do we have any other concerns about parking other than verifying that that one space is actually the use? I'm hoping everyone did their due diligence before coming to this board.
I don't have any other
Mr.
parking concerns.
Yeah, Mr. Stevie, members of the DRB, ADA parking is also reviewed by the zoning reviewer during the development package review process, and I didn't see any red flags there.
So I'm confused. Is the handicap parking going away with this proposed ATM, but will be restriped within the parking lot area so we don't lose a spot? Am I understanding that correctly? Or we don't know?
To our knowledge, there's not any existing accessible parking spaces on this. The existing clear striped area that we're proposing the ATM at is just excess area that they were not able to make a parking space.
Oh,
Yeah, Carol, I think the way from my interpretation of the presentation was that this area was just not wide enough to accommodate a full parking spot, so they striped it out.
okay. Sorry, I read it as I don't know, I was thinking it was the void
Your
space.
access zone.
Yeah, the access for an ADA.
I do believe, from knowing that site, not to speak for the applicant, but that the accessible parking is elsewhere on this. It's underneath the structure, a little closer to the doors, the actual entry doors to the building.
Oh, okay.
Maria, can you scroll up a little bit? I think we're done with this. If we don't really have to do site design standards, because I don't think parking and screening, we don't really have plaza open space, pedestrian nodes. I guess, Taylor, I didn't hear you. The pad is just going to be plain concrete to match existing paving adjacent.
Yeah, it'd be new concrete. It would be a 5,000 PSI or greater concrete pad. Would not match the asphalt that the parking surface is, but would be a concrete matching the sidewalk. Of course, it's going to be a fresh, clean concrete as opposed to the worn concrete.
Right, and I believe the existing sidewalk in that area is concrete at that spot. It's not downtown brick. Not really messing with any view sheds, shade, or streetscape elements. We're not going to make you put in a bench. I think we're done with our checklist. We have a motion on this one for discussion. Any additional discussion? I don't have any other comments. I don't think.
Maria, is our the motion that we make, is that going to give the applicant the approval they're looking for on the 10-foot clearance to the adjacent parking spot?
Yeah, Michelle, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB in their motion can choose to approve it as presented, to approve it with conditions, or request the applicant to return to the DRB with revised plans. So that's up to the DRB at this point. What I will be asking the applicant to clarify in his elevation drawing is the materials, the lighting underneath the canopy, and any other item the DRB may request. Also in that schematic where the applicant has the power pole next door, that will need to be removed to actually show what's actually going to be built on site. Again, if the DRB requires, some conditions that they don't want to see this project back, I can just try to follow up with the applicant. But if the DRB feels the applicant needs to return to the DRB with the changes that they may be proposing, it's up to the DRB to decide.
I mean, I think we could just put some conditions on it and move forward. What do you all think?
I'm just going to request, Ms. Wright, members of the DRB, if you don't want to see this back, just please be very specific in your motion. Any potential conditions, so staff has the ability to actually follow up with the applicant. So I will need you to be as specific as possible.
I guess from my point of view on this, I don't have any opposition to this location and the setbacks. It's kind of rigged in right into the only spot that really works. And if they're going to use this location, but I would like if we're going to add conditions, it is the two that were very specific. The north or the sides and back. So the east, south, and west sides panels be colored to match the existing building adjacent, and that the sign on the top be removed and any bank logoing be integrated into the side panel on the east. I think those are our two main points, correct?
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be if the logo would be visible on the east side, since the kiosk is recessed and there's not a lot of space between the kiosk and the building.
That would be the west side, wouldn't it?
Oh, got it. Okay. You're right. I was thinking north was up. And then in terms of the color, I would just make the entire kiosk, all four sides of it match the adjacent building.
Perhaps being more specific to match the gray of the adjacent block, or the block on the adjacent building, so it blends right in at that elevation.
Is that specific enough, or do we need to review the color?
I think
That
that
adjacent
would
building looks a little more
different.
in the tan taupe world, right?
Yeah, I don't care. Perhaps, it's hard to tell exact color.
Well, I think if we state that it's to match that lower ground floor level block, I think that would be
Yeah,
specific enough. And I agree, it should just be on all the sides,
yeah.
simply.
Let's entertain a motion for this project with those two conditions on there. I think those are the only two things we went going through our checklist. Those are the only two things we came up with that we would want to see slightly modified on this proposal.
So are we good doing that and not asking them to come back? Everyone okay with that?
Yeah,
I don't think they need to come back to us, right? I mean, I'm okay.
No, I think it's fine.
I think Maria, the points you were making about the proposal revisions about the pole light and the light underneath the kiosk, are those conditions we need to add to our motion, or is that stuff staff's going to handle externally?
It's up to the DRB, but I was planning on asking the applicant to show on his schematics what's actually going to be built.
I'd like to add that to our conditions, that the lighting is more graphically represented or identified on the application in the plan. That might be our three things.
And also on the elevation drawings, we're going to have a field inspector out there, so the colors should be labeled also on the elevation drawings and the materials.
Maria, in revising the electrical, do you think that would, what department will review that when that change is made?
That would be our commercial reviewers at the Planning and Development Services Department. They're the ones who check on all the building code requirements.
Okay, thanks. Well, I can try to put a motion out there if you want to bring the verbiage back up for me, please. All right. The Design Review Board has reviewed the applicant's project for compliance with Rio Nuevo area design criteria and recommends to the Planning and Development Services Director approval with the following conditions. The color of the kiosk in place of the blue should match the block of the adjacent building. And the signage, the lighted signage on top of the kiosk should be removed. With the building design standards set forth in UDC section 5.12.7.c1 through 15 and 5.12.7d. I think I kind of did that backwards, but you get the idea.
that was good, Rosemary. That was good.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Sure. Does that work, or do you want me to try again, Maria?
My mute button. That works for me. I understand. the motion.
Okay.
Ms. Bryant, members of the DRB.
You get a second?
I'll second that.
Discussions? Additions, amendments? Hearing none, I'll put this to a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Are there any nays? Hearing none, sounds like we have an approval, Maria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
So Taylor, I'll be in touch with you.
Excellent. We'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck with the big board.
For the address.
Thank y'all.
Any staff announcements, Maria? That's the next motion. That was our only case for today.
yeah, I
That
have,
is the only case today. Go ahead, Ms. Clement.
if we're on to staff announcements, I would like to discuss something. Okay. Well, I want to discuss the meeting, what happened last month's meeting during the presentation and discussion regarding the Sunshine Mile District presentation. We were presented with the perspective rendering looking east down Broadway. And I want to apologize to the board regarding my emotional response. I spoke abruptly and forcefully. I apologize for this. As a registered landscape architect, part of our charge is to be stewards of the environment. And I take that very seriously. When presented with the perspective, I was quite taken aback and actually shocked by what I didn't see. I don't know why I'm having feedback. I didn't see any trees provided shaded, healthy, walkable sidewalks. There was no illustration of storm roadway water harvesting by means of curb cuts, swales, check dams, etc. There seemed to be no addressing of the possible urban heat island mitigation technologies. All I saw were architectural shade structures discussed. All I heard was that. I saw very little green infrastructure, and I am becoming a little distressed by the trend that I'm seeing. I saw this in the SDM, the SMD, and I also saw this same trend of very little green infrastructure occurring in the incentive infill development plans that we saw the previous month. And I I don't know what to do about it. I am in contact with my council member of my ward, and we'll be getting in touch with the mayor and council to perhaps share with them the trend I'm seeing. But I want to first discuss it with you as colleagues that I greatly respect as to how you guys feel about this. What are you guys seeing? What are you thinking? Am I out of line? Help me here.
Well, Carol, I'll counter some of those points you just made with, have you been to Broadway in that area since it's been installed? Considering that graphic that was shown was a graphic we did at schematic design to show the overall lane widths and more traffic related improvements for public outreach and for giving a visual representation of what the improvements would be like, considering the political climate that that project was under at the time, as far as how much right of way and pedestrian modality it was taking. That area you were specifically speaking of has a stabilized DG walking path, several trees added, trees preserved in place, benches, and pedestrian facilities attached to that area. All areas and planting areas along that project are recessed to capture water through the entire project. I think before you speak on some of these topics, I know you were in a position where you may have had an emotional response to that graphic, but please visit those sites before you decide to disparage designs in a public forum.
Well, what I was presented with at that time was what I responded to. And no, I haven't recently visited, and it's nice to hear that things are better than what that perspective showed. But I would like to raise the concern, you know, these early design documents, if often, maybe this wasn't the case, but if they don't show these broad design parameters such as shaded walkways with trees, passive water harvesting, curb cuts, removing stormwater off the roads into planting areas, if they're not shown at the early stages, they often don't get built. Now, maybe this isn't the case, which is nice to hear, but I don't know. I responded to what I was shown, and I stand by my response. Perhaps not in the way I said it, but still I stand by the content.
And Ms. Clement, members of the DRB, I've been in communication with our landscape reviewer, Ann Warren, and with David Marhefka, the landscape architect for the Department of Transportation and Mobility. And we are organizing a meeting, a presentation with the DRB at a future meeting. This one is probably going to take place in July. We just had this discussion last week. And so I'm having some trouble. Everybody's so busy finding spots to discuss. So we just were able to discuss last week, and we have another meeting early June to take a look at draft presentations. So the DRB can be informed of, you know, the requirements and you know, how reviews are performed.
Will this be in conjunction with the presentation regarding the, you know, what came up with the Tucson water sites and water harvesting in those? This is separate, but let's not lose track of that presentation as well, Maria.
Yeah, Tucson water well sites do need to comply with existing standards anyway.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any exceptions just because it's a Tucson water site. But yeah, you know, we can further discuss with the reviewers when they present, but I'll make sure to bring it up.
Yeah, because I think communication improvements can be made on the plans in turn. Well, that's for that meeting discussion. But I think we're assuming a lot by not illustrating water harvesting technologies, et cetera, on the actual plans. But that's for that discussion. I just don't want to lose track of that discussion either, Maria.
Yeah, I'm gonna be asking also John Beal, the section manager for entitlements that oversees, you know, these special exception applications, to just try to clarify further, you know, the purview of the DRB, you know, when making recommendations to the zoning examiner. So maybe we can get some clarity there as well.
Yeah, I see, I mean, great excitement with all this new building, but it seems like we're going more status quo instead of pushing the envelope for green infrastructure and urban heat island mitigation. We're not pushing that envelope.
Yeah, and I would just like to encourage you, Carol, to continue speaking out.
Oh,
Because I'm also concerned about the buildings and and that we need to be focusing more on the sustainability of the architecture too, as well as, and these things need to be integrated right in the beginning. Otherwise,
yes,
they're add-ons that are value engineered out, basically.
exactly, exactly.
And these issues are getting more and more important, and sometimes, I mean, I just heard a study yesterday that actually green buildings don't cost anymore, but but that's a whole research area in itself, that sometimes there's a kind of ignorance with developers and short-sighted goals to think about these things.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, I will keep pursuing and keep speaking out because I can't do any other. But I'll try and be more polite.
Hey, Carol, I think on the water harvesting and stuff, please reach out to Ann separately outside this board. She is currently going through a review process of the commercial rainwater harvesting ordinance. And they are actively kind of putting the screws down on that a little bit more. And it's actually, in my opinion, been determined that it's more of a civil engineer's issue, that as landscape architects, our purview, or our, we're stewards and we want to water harvest and all this, but if we aren't getting the assistance or coordination from our civil engineer consultant partners, it's very difficult for us to achieve, right? So there is a process looking at that right now, and there's also a group reevaluating some of the terminology in the native plant preservation ordinance. So if you want to be active in those two things, please reach out to her. She's looking for professional input on those things, and and it's definitely a step in the direction you are discussing, because we do try our best as professionals in the field, and there's all these underlying themes of utilities and water detention and retention codes that are in conflict with this other, there's a lot of these other things that make our job difficult, right? And put us in a corner, and then we're the last part of the plan to get accomplished, and by then money and will and all that's gone, right? So please reach out to her and find out how you can assist with that process, because it's definitely something that's being looked at right now. And
Thank you.
And
when I was working for Wheat Sharp Associates, I was lead designer for Scott Avenue, and that turned out to be very successful with stormwater harvesting, with the shaded walkways, comfortable walking communities, because from the get-go, I started coordinating with the roadway engineers, with the hydrologists, with the civil engineers from the get-go. So they didn't have any surprises. They knew that they were going to grade their road, and that the curb cuts for water intake into the planting areas was going to be every 50 feet down that road. And it was early coordination that allowed for the success of that project, not add-ons that, as Suzanne said, would get value VE'd out.
Correct, right. That's ultimately the best process, and how we are all told this process is supposed to work, right?
Right. But you guys know me well enough. I think sometimes it takes a bit of a someone who doesn't let go of their desires or whatever to be persistent about it. I pursued the roadway engineers and the hydrologists, and I said, no, come on, you guys, we can work together as a team. It takes, it's hard, but it pays off.
So I guess on that point, I think, Carol, you and I have had a little bit of not necessarily disagreement, but of what the purview of this board and how far we can push on those topics. I agree with everything you're saying in context and even in concept and professionally, like we're on the same page 100%. All these things are things that need to be incorporated and done better and pushed further in our professional environment. Is this board the venue for that? The things we're looking at and trying to approve or give people a projects relief from or guidance on are pretty narrow. And I want to make sure, what my point of this is, I want to make sure we're not overstepping into giving directive and giving project directive to get approval, i.e. I don't want to ever have a case where a client or a applicant comes back around to staff and says, I feel like I was being given an option. I could get no approval, or I could do these 3 things that are beyond what I'm going to be required to do per code or per, any legal requirement in order to get approval, right? So I want to make sure we get good direction on that, so we never land in that case where an applicant feels like they're being told to do something outside of our legal bounds in order to get approval. But yes, I'd like to support you in your task of pushing more on, getting some of these kind of low effort, beneficial requirements. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of effort to add more water harvesting or water harvesting information to plans, but I do want to make sure we're staying within our legal bounds within this board and what we're allowed to put as conditions on a zoning application, because it is just a zoning application. These aren't construction documents. These are not permit drawings. So there's still that whole process that needs to go through, and we have to have some trust in Ann and our other city staff in their reviews and being compliant with code requirements outside of what we're looking at. So I think having someone come in with that, Maria, is probably going to be really useful to this group right now.
Yeah, I would agree. And thank you for your support, Chris. And I will keep pursuing any way I can. And thank you for suggesting I talk to Miss Ann Warner. I will.
She's great. I really enjoy Ann.
Yeah.
Like, she's a breath of fresh air from, Joe Linville to, Andy and all that, the last 20 years of landscape reviewers at the city. She's a different take on that. And she's pushing a lot of standards that we have become status quo over the years of how we do our job. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Any other straight staff announcements? Are we good with that conversation, Carol?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, just a case coming up your way. It's this is a site that was converted from single family residence to office, so it needs to go through DRB for your review. Also, I wanted to touch bases with you about availability with the DRB over the summer. So I just want to explore the possibility if I cannot reach quorum, because it's just, once a month, right? And if I cannot reach a quorum during an X scheduled date, if there's a chance that we can move that date to a different date so we can accommodate applicants.
Do you want us to email you our availability, or do you want to discuss that now, Miss Maria?
Not right now. Just wanted to see if that door can be opened. And then it depends on the cases we get. But if the need may be that I don't reach quorum, if we can move that day to a different day to reach quorum.
Okay.
Because we're just meeting once a month over the summer.
Do we have those dates in our calendar for once a month already?
Yes, you do.
Oh,
Maria,
yeah.
Are there 2 in June? Are there still 2 in June?
Let me check.
Do I have them?
Yeah, the 3rd and the 17th.
The 3rd. Oh, we have 2 in June still. Okay. So it would be July only, I guess. I was thinking it was also June. But, you know, I know people start taking some time off, very well deserved, so.
Maria, generally I have flexibility in my time. August is my vacation month, so that's the month I'm going to have some potential non-available times.
Okay, so if I see the need to move a date, then I will reach out to the DRB and explore another date, if that's okay.
Correct.
I know I won't be here on July 8th, so just kind of, I don't know if others have vacation planned that week.
Okay.
I will not be here August 5th.
I may have an issue July 8th and June 17th, but I'll be abroad, but I may be able to sign in.
2 in the morning? Or am I doing that backwards?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just play by ear over the summer, see what happens.
Okay.
That's great. Okay, thank you so much. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Say, if that's all we have today, close this meeting out. Go start our Fridays. I don't have the official time in front of me. My it blocks my whole screen when I pull this up.
It's 8:50 a.m.
8:50 a.m. Adjourned.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.